Cool. And if we could just promote Councilmember Dish and we will get started. And we did see for the record, Ellie Abrams is here, but looks like she's having connection issues. So we'll promote her as soon as she's around. And then, yeah, we'll get started. All right, welcome to the working session for the City Planning Commission on Tuesday, June 10th. This is 7 p.m. To listen or speak at public comment, please call 206-337-9723 or 213-338-8477 and enter meeting ID 977-663-4126. We'll call the meeting to order because it's a working session. We don't need to take a formal quorum, and we will move right into public comment. Persons may speak for 3 minutes about an item that's not listed as a public hearing on the agenda, and please state your name and address for the record. Do we have any speakers?
We have a handful of interested speakers. If you'll just give me one moment to share screen for our timer.
Cool. Sounds like a plan. Oh, sorry, that's my dog. 1 second.
And our first speaker this evening is Greg Monroe. You have permission to address the Planning Commission.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I just wanted to commend the commission on this document. I think someone like myself has been kind of grappling with these issues over the last couple of months since being made aware of the comprehensive plan. And I really thought the sections early on, like putting the plan in historical context, in a context of zoning history as well in Ann Arbor, was very helpful. I submitted this in written comments, but I do have one request. At the bottom of page 6, it brings up the estimates around water treatment and sanitary and water plant capacity. And it references a current growth rate of about 650 units per year. I was at the commission meeting, I believe it was a week ago, when the city water infrastructure spokesperson presented the information. In that original presentation, I believe, actually, I'm confident that there was a SEMCOG estimate of population growth. I only asked that in that paragraph that we provide a citation and a link to that presentation as it was given to the Planning Commission. I understand the Planning Commission has every right to sort of use whatever growth rate they would like. But I do think the public should be made aware, or in the effort of transparency, to have that presentation also linked so that the public can draw their own conclusions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe.
Adam Juszkiewicz, you have 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
Hi, this is Adam Juszkiewicz calling from Las Vegas Drive in the 4th Ward. The housing appendix you're looking at tonight is a very important document, and I'm very glad to see it. It outlines the why behind the specific changes being contemplated as we revise our comprehensive land use plan. It goes into a lot of detail about the specific situation in Ann Arbor, the history of zoning in our city, our local housing crisis, and the context in the larger national housing crisis. I'm glad that you asked that this be included in the new comprehensive plan as a response to community feedback and questions you have all been getting from residents. I think this document does a great job of clearing the air and should answer a lot of questions for a lot of people. Planning Commission, city staff, and the consultants are to be commended for putting this together. I urge everyone to read it, and don't miss the literature review linked on page 21, which dives deeper into the academic research that backs up this document. I want to comment on 3 specific points that jumped out to me. Many people don't understand why we need to so extensively revise the existing plan. On this point, it's good to see it explained here that our current Unified Development Code has its roots in the 1963 zoning ordinance. In 1963, my parents were in elementary school. We had not yet landed a man on the moon. The Fair Housing Act wouldn't be passed for another 5 years. It was an entirely different time. Another point that has been brought up by many speakers is that of infrastructure. Will we have enough capacity to support all this growth? Well, based on what I'm reading here and what I heard at last week's working session, the answer is we have enough for a decade or so of growth. That gives us time to plan ahead, and planning ahead is exactly what staff are doing. And finally, there's the question of values. As this appendix states, quote, the fact that Ann Arbor is fast becoming a place where working and middle-class families cannot afford to live is an affront to the city's core values of equity, sustainability, and affordability, unquote. This is well put. Ann Arbor is my hometown, and these values mirror my main concerns at the ballot box and my main concerns when I speak to council or to this body. And they mirror the values I've seen expressed by many Ann Arborites. I'm glad these are the values we are following as we write this new plan. Again, thank you for bringing this document forward, and thank you for the work you do for our community.
Thank you, Mr. Juskevich. Do we have anyone else that would like to comment at this time?
I do not see further hands raised. I would also like to mention that Commissioner Abrams did mention they would be unable to attend the full meeting this evening, so perhaps they're just listening in for a short period. So I will cease to try to promote that iPad.
Thank you. Do we have any other? Looks like, by the way, Commissioner Adams is actually raising his hand. Okay. Do we have any other present that would like to speak at this time? Give it one more second.
I could ask our guest panelist, Ms. Flowers, to come on while we look for those last hands. Thank you.
Yep. And we will start to get, the presentations for the updated tiered corridors and intersections. So with that, we'll close public comment. Let's move on to our presentation and Ms. Flowers.
Thank you. Thank you to Hank for the invitation to come to Planning Commission. This is actually my first time at Planning Commission, so lovely to meet you all. I've been at the city about 3 years now, so very excited to be before this body this evening. And I'm going to go, I do have permission to go ahead and share my screen, correct?
You should. If it doesn't
Thank
work,
you.
let me know and I'll adjust things.
Okay. Just making sure I get the right one. All right, can you confirm that you can see my beginning slide that says updated tiered corridors and intersections? Fantastic, thanks for the thumbs up. All right, so we are here tonight to discuss with you our updated tier corridors and intersections. The map that you have on the screen in front of you is the adopted plan document map from 2021. This highlights the focus corridors being tier 1 or tier 2, and I can get into how we differentiate those two. So you would see corridors such as Miller Avenue, the entirety of Main Street, the entirety of Plymouth Road as that tier 1 corridor. Additionally, we have our tier 2 focus corridors, which are highlighted in like an orange yellow color, such as Huron Parkway and Getty's. Smattered around this map are many of the intersections that were called out as part of that high injury safety network. So from the original plan, we had 17 intersections and 56 miles of corridors that we had. This was based on 2014 through 2018 crash data. And that was how we got to that original grouping of locations. And just as a quick mathematical operation, the corridor should be thought of as underperforming corridors ranked against themselves across the city. So we're not comparing any other system outside of the city streets or the city roadways within Ann Arbor. Yes, you will see Main Street because that is within the city limits, even though we don't have jurisdiction over that roadway. We still found that exercise to be very valuable for us to understand what corridors and areas around the city were underperforming. And at a very, very high level, a tier 1 corridor and or intersection are 2 standard deviations from the mean. And a tier 2 would be 1 standard deviation from the mean. So what is the purpose? How do we use these corridors? Well, this is part of our Vision Zero goal that was outlined in the plan. We identify those high crash frequency and severity locations across our community. And what it does is it provides focused attention for capital investments and to also help us prioritize capital investments within the transportation and engineering system. And you can look specifically as a page reference, pages 27 and 28 in our transportation plan. So I'm just going to briefly review our kind of updated methodology, the new segmentation for our corridors, how we worked with the Ann Arbor Police Department in this methodology update, some of the manual changes that we made. And just as a note, once the plan was developed, the intention was to update these layers every 2 years. We do use 5 years worth of crash data, and we thought that if we waited a full 5 years, that would really just be too far removed from the consistent changes that we're seeing across our community, and we wanted to be more responsive to the changing nature of our community. So for the segments, if you remember the first map I provided, like Plymouth Corridor, we had the entirety of the entire corridor as one whole segment. And when we really thought about how that was working for constructability, I can't think of one capital project that would list the entirety of Plymouth Road or Huron Parkway. So we did shorten the segments in this updated methodology to more closely align with adjacent land use and constructability. Another item that we did update was the point allocation by which we applied segments. When we started doing a deep dive into the 2019 through 2023 crash data, we really saw a pretty large variation in what A-level crashes are. That was something that was brand new to me as well. And so we worked with our Ann Arbor Police Department to better understand how they categorize crashes. Obviously, a fatality is a fatality, and a serious injury can be someone who has a broken wrist to a debilitating but not fatal injury. So the variability just within that category was very, very broad. And given the purpose and function of our Vision Zero plan to really call out and focus on the fatal and the most serious injury crashes, we learned that our Ann Arbor Police Department, if there is a very serious crash, responds to what we call serious injury callouts. And so we started looking at when the frequency of those callouts were happening for certain crashes, and we thought that that may be a better metric to utilize for really addressing those areas in our community where we do have fatal and the most serious of injury crashes. That is now getting 50 points. Those non-AAPD callouts are now getting 30 points. B level is 10, C injury is 1, and property damage is 5. These are the categories. If you were to go to the Michigan Traffic Crash Facts website, which anyone and everyone has access to, you will see the same report that the police officers in any community in the state of Michigan fill out. They're the exact same report, and crashes are coded a very specific way. And so that's where you're seeing some of the consistency for like a B level injury versus a C. Some manual changes that we did make, there were a couple corridors that we removed. For example, the Moore corridor, which is very, very short, excuse me. And the crashes were really related to the intersection. And so it would have been like a double counting of those crashes. Similarly was the East Medical Center corridor. And the two intersections at like Washtenaw and Wilmot and Washtenaw Forest, those are actually both intersection crashes. And there is a bit of a bifurcated nature along Washtenaw Avenue. So those were more associated with one actual crash instead of two different ones. So sometimes there's a little bit of looking at the data and making sure that we're not duplicating crashes or misinformation. As I alluded to, one of the reasons why we are performing this update is because it is called out in the plan. We are to focus our investments on corridors and intersections with the most serious injury crashes. And so therefore we need to make sure that we're using the most recent available data. And one of the questions that some people tend to get is, well, why aren't we using 2024 or 2025 data? Because it hasn't been published yet. Well, AAPD definitely has access to that data. The information that we get is from a certified data set from the state of Michigan. And that is what we use. That way the information has been sanitized to protect people's privacy. So we don't have access to anything that's not already public. So let's dig in a little bit to the new locations. I am going to provide a brief overview of the locations, and then I'm going to pop out of the slideshow and show you the updated map layers that anyone can now access. Those have been published. But for our Tier 1 intersections, the list that you see, we have some probably not surprising locations. We have some locations along MDOT-owned roadways. We have Ellsworth, Huron, East Liberty, South Division. But 7 of these Tier 1 intersections are MDOT owned. That is not lost on us. These are pretty consistent locations by which we struggle to make meaningful progress on because of the ownership issue. A map. I will show you a map with layers with all the road names, but when I developed the presentation, we hadn't had this published yet. So I do want to call out that this is our new Tier 1 locations. There are some similarities from our old locations, which again, we can turn on both of those layers so that we can see that in just a couple moments. But we have some standouts. We've got North Main. We've got, Huron Street. We have Packard. We've got Washtenaw. We're seeing some consistent corridors by which we are that are underperforming. We're also seeing some shorter segments noted around the community. This is just a repeat to reiterate why we are focusing on those investments. And then we go into the Tier 2 intersections. This is many, many more than what we had on our last slide. This is 20 different intersections, and 10 of these are on MDOT-owned roadways. So we can see, again, from the corridor map, we're seeing Huron Street popping up. We're seeing Main Street. We're seeing Washtenaw Avenue. But we do have locations not on trunk lines that are completely under the jurisdiction of the city, such as State, Eisenhower, State, Victor's Way, State, and Ellsworth, which is actually a joint intersection with the Washtenaw County Road Commission. Huron Parkway, etc. I did want to provide just a screenshot of the map. Trying to like zoom out, the image on the right is really that zoomed out version just to kind of get your spatial awareness of where we're seeing some locations popping up. And then when we drill down a bit more and we look at the image on the left, you can really see those road names popping up. So we've got our Main Street, we have Huron, we've got Packard, Southview, Gettys around the community. Our tier 2 corridors, again, a little bit more of a distribution than what we had in the past. But again, some similar areas that we really want to tackle in a meaningful way. So we do have this Jackson Huron corridor again. We've got a much smaller segment of Plymouth Road. We are seeing Washtenaw Avenue, Ann Arbor Saline Road, State around the community. So just some high-level summary information. When we're looking at our intersections, just comparing what the city has direct 100% control over versus MDOT, you know, there's a difference. And this is causing a little bit of challenge. And I think that's why we saw the trunk line transfer study and why City Council directed the city administrator to begin those negotiations for trunk line transfer. So for our tier 1 intersections, where we have just under 30% on city streets, so 3 out of the 11 intersections. And then again, for tier 2, it's 50%. For our MDOT, 72% of our tier 1 intersections are touching one of their corridors. And that makes that, again, more challenging to create projects and to get MDOT to participate. Similarly, with our corridors, we can see the percentage of the entire system, and then how many miles that is under either our jurisdiction or kind of the shared MDOT jurisdiction. And I'm looking at this kind of tier 2 mileage, you know, that is much, much more than what we're seeing actually on our MDOT roadways. So that gives me a lot of hope that we can make meaningful progress and change given the suite of projects that we have coming up. So I do want to take another moment to talk about the difference between the tier 1 and tier 2. Excuse me. So tier 1 corridors are seeing more fatal AAPD crash investigations and serious injury crashes than other streets in the city. And again, that relates to the 2 standard deviations from the mean when we do our analysis. Similarly, tier 2 corridors are just seeing less crashes in comparison to our tier 1. And again, that's 1 standard deviation from the mean. And then we do apply an additional layer of crashes that are focused on our vulnerable road users, such as pedestrians and cyclists. I think I've already done some of the next steps. We are updating the methodology to be available on the website. That would be an appendix item under the Vision Zero plan. We will provide all of the tier 1 and tier 2 corridors in the development of the new capital improvement program, working with Kayla and all of the other program managers in 2026. But we are already starting to use these updated corridors in our planning studies, such as our multi-lane evaluation study that my colleague Trevor Bryden is putting forth, and then other projects that have come before City Council, such as what will be coming up on the North Main Street Transportation Study. Yeah. So before we get to questions, if I can take like maybe 1 more minute and just show the dashboard. Well, not the dashboard, sorry, a map. So on all of the city maps, you can go to maps, transportation, and then turn on and off the different layers that we have available. And so under the transportation plan, you're going to see focus intersections and corridors for 2021.
Suzanne,
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to note, I didn't know if you were intending to pull up a different window. I'm still seeing your presentation. I don't know if you were intending to show all.
Oh, no. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I thought that. Oh, here's the map. My apologies. Okay, can you see the map now?
Yes.
Excellent. That's what I intended. Let me start that over again. Thank you for pointing that out. So everyone should have access to these on the city transportation map site. So all you'll do is go to the transportation plan and turn on that layer. And then you can look at what our original intersections and corridors were. We can turn on the focus intersection, the new focus intersections, so you can kind of see what the old and the new look like. We can turn on and off the old and new corridors. So you can really see some of that differentiation that has happened with the new not only methodology, but the updated crash data. So I just wanted to let everyone know that these data layers are available and available for you to check out and interact with. I am
Suzanne,
going to
I
stop
might
sharing
have
this. Oh,
missed
yeah.
it, but what is an easy way for people who do not already have this URL in their easy access to find this map?
So what I generally do is I go to the main government page and I type maps, and then I go to transportation, and that's where I find that layer. That's usually how I navigate the city
Yeah.
website.
Would you be able to demonstrate?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm sorry, my cat is extra affectionate right now, which he never is. So I'm just gonna, you can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Great. So City of Ann Arbor. And I just go to the home page. And I go to the search bar and I type maps. So it'll give me this GIS maps and resources link right at the tippy top. So this is all of that geospatial information that I know I use as a transportation planner very regularly and routinely. So you're going to go down to transportation category. And about most of the way to the bottom, you're going to click on the transportation map. So lots of great resources here. And you'll want to click on this little, I don't know, kind of sandwichy looking button. And you can look at crosswalks. I turn that off if I don't need them. And then you can go to the focus corridors and intersections. And there are all of those layers there. You're going to have to turn on and off this little eye to make sure that the layers, that main category of layers gets turned on. And then you can turn on and off the layers based on what you're really trying to get at. I hope that helped.
That is very helpful. Thank you. That's
Of course.
helpful for our staff and listeners.
Awesome. So my last slide was just questions, or if there's additional clarification that I can provide. And if I can't, I will make sure that I get it to you.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll head to questions. Commissioner Weatherby.
Okay, so I live on South Main Street. So I was kind of focused on South Main on those. And it looks like 2014, 2018, South Main was in the tier 1. And then in the new, it's not. And what's interesting to me is because there was a lot we went from 4 lanes or 3 lanes, 4 lanes. How many lanes were there? There was traffic calming on South Main during that time. And so can I infer from that that actually in the section that there was the bike lanes added and the road diet, it looks like the crash data showed what we would like it to show, which is in that particular section, it fell out of the tier 1, tier 2 range.
I think that I would say crashes move. And we may have a different crash pattern next year, you know, when we rerun the analysis. So I think what I would caution, you know, the members around the table is that engineering solutions alone will not solve our crash problems. That is a component of the Vision Zero plan. If you look at the plan, there's all of these different categories of education, encouragement, enforcement, engineering, and engineering is one of the tools. One of the parts of the analysis that we found that was so problematic is the behavioral changes or the behaviors that we're actually seeing. And if you walk, bike, ride the bus, or drive in Ann Arbor, you can see people driving fast. You can see people running red lights, stop signs, not stopping for peds. That's really what we're trying to solve. Do we still have engineering issues that we need to address? Yes, but I would not want to falsely connect those two things. I think that it helps because it gives that when you go from a 5-lane cross section to a 3-lane cross section, you are imparting the psychology of a slower, more narrow street. But it doesn't, unfortunately, prevent somebody who wants to choose to do 90 or chooses to drive impaired. And that to me is one of the biggest challenges that we're kind of chasing. I do like that connection, but I just don't want to give a false equivalency to that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted
Yes.
to check to see if it's like, can we automatically assume that this has happened because of X? But your information is that something changed, but it's not necessarily because of that particular issue. Thank you.
Of course.
Do we have anyone else that would like to ask any questions? Commissioner Mills.
Hi, thanks for this. Actually, your response to Commissioner Weatherby made me think of a question, which is the idea that they move, that crashes move, and how we should be thinking about that in the context of our comprehensive plan and land use. So you're kind of the next steps. We're really focused on the CIP, which is important in making investments in a place. Maybe it does move it to the places that we don't make investments in, which would be a shame, because I'm hoping that overall collectively then we are reducing the crashes, which is one of the things that's in our purview. And so thank you for coming and bringing that. I guess the other big thing that we will talk about for the rest of this meeting is thinking about growth in the future and the corridors are a lot of the places where we're envisioning a lot of growth. And I'm curious about, from a transportation safety perspective, actually more growth would suggest perhaps, and moving things closer to the road could suggest that this is a place where you want to go slower. And so I'm just curious about how we should think about that. Yeah. And then I also have, then I'll stop so that I'll mute. One more question about the East Medical Center. You mentioned that it came off. I see that the tier 2.
Yeah.
I am a mostly pedestrian cyclist. I've had my closest calls there. And so that is really, I don't doubt the data. And
so I'm actually going to start with the easiest question, which is East Medical Center Drive. So I was, I will say we've been working on this for months and months and months. And when I saw that corridor or intersection was not there, I went back to what the crashes looked like. And I clicked on every single dot on our crash reporting map because I didn't believe it either. And the good news is that we are not having fatalities and serious injury crashes there. That is the good news. That is a success story when it comes to safety. When we have all of the layers in place and a crash happens, that's because we have a systemic failure. I'm not saying it is not an uncomfortable, high stress, very busy intersection. I have done traffic counts there with the little hash marks when I actually first moved to the county. So I definitely understand that. But that location right now in this data set is a success. Whereas other locations, we are seeing pedestrians being hit, cyclists being hit, fatal and very serious injury car crashes happening. The most prevalent feature there are rear ends and, property damage and low-level injuries. And again, I know it's hard to connect that because I think we've all been conditioned that like crashes are bad, but a low injury crash where everyone walks away, and as it relates to Vision Zero is a success. As it relates to, so that was the actual like the easy question, but I don't remember all of the like little subtext of your first question, Commissioner.
It was more, how should we be thinking if this map is
Okay.
always changing? How should we be thinking about it in terms of areas for growth?
I mean, I think that when I look at the work that this committee is doing, what I look at what our colleagues in planning are doing, they're doing everything that we would want to see happen. We are rezoning to allow for those more high intensity uses closer to the street and providing opportunities where people have transportation choice. And that choice decades ago was only one mode. And we're seeing that with that density, gosh, do I want to move to Ann Arbor? Do I really need a car? I can't tell you how many people I meet on the bus or walking or when I'm cycling in the cycle track, that just stop me. And they're like, isn't this great? We moved here and we sold our car. So the investments that are happening in the way that development is really in alignment with the goals and objectives of not only City Council, but of many other documents and policies that are being enacted by, my colleagues around this virtual space tonight. So I see it as a win-win.
Thank you. All right. Do we have any other commissioners with questions, comments? Yeah, Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Thank you. So you mentioned, gave us data that shows that 72% of tier 1 intersections are within MDOT's jurisdiction, and then basically alluded that it's hard to get MDOT to participate in like any sort of projects, but like 72% is a lot. So what is the process for, like, are we just sort of like, okay, this is really bad, but like it's MDOT street, so like what can we do? Or like how do you navigate that?
Yeah, so I can speak to what has been happening. We continue to have partnerships with MDOT and find opportunities to make changes. And the one that like first comes to mind was my former manager and colleague, Luke Liu, who worked on the signal work at Huron and 7th and then at the Jackson Huron Ravina split. I could never turn left out of the neighborhood. I could never cross the street. When they're coming in to do infrastructure level projects, that's where we partner. That's where we capitalize to get the audible pedestrian signals installed, the leading pedestrian intervals, these small changes that add up to lives saved. And so we continue to look for those opportunities for partnership. We are going to, at the end of this month, we are looking to have the first of a discussion with MDOT, how we can mutually get to achieve, MDOT safety goals and the cities. MDOT is not meeting their targets statewide, and they're definitely not meeting their targets in the city of Ann Arbor. So we want to help them find success. And so we just need to continue to work with them to find those opportunities in their capital projects. If we need to kick in a little money and we can, how we can work with them to solve these issues. That's really what we need to be doing, and that's what we are doing. We're not just sitting back.
Thank you.
Of course.
I figured that.
Yeah.
Do we have any other commissioners with questions, comments? Okay, seeing none. I was also looking at this from the lens of how does this impact our comprehensive planning process? And just want to add my 2 cents. I think just to be clear, the moving together to Vision Zero, is a 2021 document which won't be replaced. It will continue to be a planning document in our overall comprehensive plan. And it's one of the features of it. The areas that I think are I think that we should be mindful as a body. If you take a look at the plan, there are addressing critical gaps in sidewalk system. I think being more mindful about the ADA transition plan. So I remember we looked at that property on Miller from a site plan perspective. So continuing to focus on reviewing site plans from that lens. I think there is improving multimodal access to transit stops, new policies to better align parking supply and demand, and then ensuring that all residents have access to basic daily needs within a 20-minute walk. And so that comes down to, again, land use and kind of the things that we're talking about with comprehensive planning with respect to land use becoming a little bit more open to the concept of basic needs within areas that historically has not allowed that. So that's the way I've thought about it. But thank you so much for all of the presentation. Really no question, but just a kind of a rehash of ensuring that Vision Zero continues to be a part and a cornerstone of our document. So
Thank you.
yeah, of course. All right. With that, any other final thoughts from anybody else before we move on to our next topic? Seeing none. Ms. Flowers, thank you so much for your time today. Okay. With that, we're going to move on to the next presentation. Give me 1 second. Let me just go back to the agenda. We are moving on to our next item, which is going to be a presentation from our planning staff. With that, we will go to Manager Kelly and Planning Manager Leonard as we look towards making a quick transition. Please hang tight with us as we change screens.
Hello, commissioners. I am actually going to, with their flexibility, I'm going to dismiss Deputy Planning Manager Kelly. They have taken some time away from some training that they are at, and I'm grateful as I was out of town for most of the day and was a little uncertain about this. So you're stuck with me for the balance of the meeting, and but more beneficial to you, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, who I'll leave it to Michelle, but she has led, I think, some really fantastic work with the housing appendix that's been shared with you in the packet. This has been something that I think is very centered to a lot of conversations that's happening in the community that you've been hearing about. That's something you've been asking for. I think is a little bit more narrative on, I think, frankly, trying to link some of the landscape of research and data to some of the policy goals that you have been working on and the city council's been working on. So I'll turn it over to Michelle to maybe talk a little bit about the development of that, and then maybe just open it up to a discussion. I hope you'll, maybe we can just focus on really high level points or suggestions that you have rather than any sort of line by line. So Michelle.
Good evening. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
excellent. So I'm happy to share my screen when we get there and we can take a look at the appendix, but I worked on this with a group of planners on staff, largely as a response to some critiques that there was not enough data backing our proposed recommendations for densifying. And so we spent some time looking at the history of our zoning as it relates to housing, pulling as much data as we can for our market, and then a more thorough review of academic literature, also reports and toolkits that are available to us from the American Planning Association and the Michigan Association of Planning. So I am happy to walk through this if you all would like. But I guess what I'm looking for from you all tonight is if you feel comfortable with this will be a part of the comp plan in the appendix. And that's really what it's here for. I don't know if data is necessarily going to change the hearts and minds of those who are fearful of change to their neighborhoods, but it's really more to be additive or supplementary to our comprehensive plan, and so that you all feel comfortable and that you all feel supported with the data and the research that's available for the decisions that we're making in this plan. So that's what I'm looking for tonight. If you feel like there's anything major missing, we can try to continue to look into it. I am not necessarily, though, trying to get us to go through line by line like we have been doing with our comp plan, but if it comes to that, it comes to that. So I guess I'll open it up first. If there's any place someone wants to start, we can start there. Otherwise, I can walk you through maybe how we tried to organize this or how to think about it.
I think Ms. Bennett might be helpful if you just let us through kind of the way you thought about it, how it was organized, types of data that you
Sure.
were hoping to convey to the.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me go ahead and share. Okay. You all are seeing this?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So I wanted to start broad, and I wanted to explain to people who might be coming into this process for the first time, the comprehensive planning process, that when we say housing crisis, that this is not new and this is not unique to Ann Arbor. So I wanted to draw attention to the fact that this is a national crisis that dates back to about 2008 during the Great Recession, which was a mortgage-based recession, had a huge impact on the housing market nationally, globally, and that right as we were about to recover, the pandemic hit. And so we have, for almost 2 decades now, been suffering from a housing shortage. I tried to recap some things that we heard often from residents was like, why aren't you doing this or why aren't you doing this? And so I tried to recap here what we are limited by at the state level, and also the efforts that our state, our governor and MISTA are trying to make. So there are a few things in here about some efforts, especially the recent change in the Michigan Planning Enabling Act that asks for us to include a range of housing options, affordability, attainability, to address that there is a housing crisis. I tried to take into consideration all of the things that were asked. One of them was to include the MAP's 15 tools to reform zoning as it relates to housing. And if you look at this list, many of which we are proposing or already do at the city, which does sort of go to this bigger issue, and that zoning is not going to solve all of these problems, but that it is one of the tools that we have.
Matt,
So with that,
Matt being the Michigan Association of Planning, for anybody who might not be familiar with that.
yes, our state chapter of the American Planning Association. I talk about Ann Arbor's tools, and please feel free to interrupt me. I can't see all of you. I will not be offended at all if you just want to chime in or ask a clarifying question as I go. I talk about some of the tools Ann Arbor has and that we currently employ. So the fact that we have found a way to incentivize affordable housing when the state makes that difficult, through our planned unit development, that we passed a millage in 2020 that allows funds for us to for the Housing Commission largely to help build some of these units for us. Yes, Commissioner Weich.
Just a note as you're working through this on the affordability, when we removed our parking minimums, that also we heard from affordable housing developers that also helped because the state requires parking in affordable housing or whatever the municipality that they're serving in whatever the minimum of the municipality that they're building the housing in. So I think when we made that change to remove parking minimums from our UDC, that had a net positive on affordable housing developers in our jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you. Okay, just making a note of that. I try to clarify here what we mean by affordable. This has been a big topic. It's always asked when we meet with the community. And that's because they are fearful that most development that gets built is towards the higher end, and they're not seeing the connection as to how this contributes. And so I did try to differentiate here between income eligible housing, right? That there's some sort of subsidy, some sort of requirement that you have to meet, some sort of legal contract that you have to meet, versus more broadly what we're talking about with making market rate units more affordable across all income levels. So I tried to draw that distinction there. We write about some other contributors to the Ann Arbor housing market. One is our property tax. So we talked about this, how this can sort of limit turnover in housing because people, it's not always financially feasible for households to downsize, right? When the property tax becomes uncapped, and how that can stifle some of our housing supply. The ever increasing enrollment at the University of Michigan, who have not kept up with that in their housing, and how that impacts our housing market. How we have some limited developable land due to the green belt, due to our townships being semi-rural in nature and keeping their densities quite high, or sorry, densities quite low, as well as some analysis from our consultants that when you remove township islands, historic districts, floodplains, public land right-of-ways, and before, when we were looking at single family and duplex zoning, that we have less than 13% of our land that's available for major new development. We look at the history of zoning. We talk about generally nationwide and in Ann Arbor that it has been used as a tool for separating people by income and race, and that is a directive from council for us to look into that and to try to repair any of that harm. So I got to read through some historic zoning districts and summarize them here. We start all the way in 1923. We look at some key years. We did not look through 100 years of our zoning, but we looked at 1923, the 40s, the 60s, the 90s, the early to mid 2000s, when we know of major changes that happened. Talk about infrastructure here. It's a summary
Planner
of the
Bennett.
memo. Yes.
Sorry. Did you note when Tower Plaza got what happens right after Tower Plaza? I know it's near the R4C, because nothing in the city has gotten larger than that 26-story development, which means whoever put that in place, we're still living with the legacy of that decision.
I did not specifically look into that, nor do I know the year to look for, but I can ask the planning team
I
if
think Planner DeLeo will have that at the ready for you.
okay, so specifically, so I can ask her, but specifically you want to know what is the regulation that
No, I just want to note that we had the ability to build something that big in the city. Then it was
Oh.
built, and then the planning changed to prohibit it, and it's been prohibited that whole
Okay.
since then, which means in the downtown core where we would want the tallest buildings, we cannot do it because of the legacy of the zoning restriction that comes as a result of the community at that time rejecting that development. But we still live with the legacy of that decision. That's all. So it could
Got
just
it.
be a line as you have it here,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
I think it's a worthwhile one because it actually stunts a lot of development and growth at least in density.
Okay. Thank you. Infrastructure, we are familiar now after our memo and presentation. This is a summary here to explain that while we were visioning our preferred land uses, that we did not restrain ourselves by infrastructure. And that now that we have what we want, we will plan accordingly through our capital improvement process to get the infrastructure that we need to accommodate desired growth. So this is a lot of text. I moved on here with some data, so there are some charts and things, other things to look at. So let's see where we start here. We look at rents and we do compare to other Big Ten college towns. Please note that not all of them were available. So this is not all of them that are in the Big Ten, but we are showing here that we have Ford's the highest median rent. And also when we compare it to other cities across Michigan, that we have some of the highest rent. And that we are increasingly cost burdened community for renters in particular. You can see here the gap between our median household income and our median rent and our median home value, and you can see how it's getting worse over time. And that the percentage of people that are cost burdened, which is defined as spending 30% or more of your income on housing costs, how that is getting worse over time. Not just for renters, it is worse for renters. Oh, that's right. It's not as bad. It's never been as bad for homeowners, but we can actually see here that they are not suffering at the same rates, and that over time, it looks like it's gotten better. We can talk a little bit more about that too down below. We looked at that by age as well, because a common comment from residents is that that's because of our students. But you can see if you break the cost burden renter households out by age, that our senior citizens, people in their prime working years, are also cost burdened by our rents. Then we look at missing middle income. We are increasingly becoming a community of high wages and low wages, and that in some ways mimics the country. But we can see which income brackets are growing in the community. And also an age breakdown as well. So the community is getting older and wealthier. This, you're familiar with the population chart. So we try to make a connection between missing middle income and missing middle housing. So we describe here what missing middle housing is. We talk about how household composition is changing. Our households are getting smaller for many reasons. People are having fewer children, they're having children later in life, or not having children at all. We have empty nesters, we have a lot of people that are living alone. And so if our households are getting smaller, does that make a case for having smaller units as well? When we looked at the data, our single family homes have actually gotten larger over time, even though our household sizes are shrinking. So you can see this over time. The assessing office has data from 1940 up until recently. So that's a mismatch. And that's more of a mismatch, not only because household composition is changing, but because incomes are stagnating as well. So if we look over time, we have, especially in this category, it's kind of a prime missing middle category, has actually shrunk over time as a percentage of all of our homes. And this is not the direction that we want to be going. So we look at sales of homes. So here's condos versus single family. So we can see here that smaller units generally are less expensive.
Michelle, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yeah,
Sorry.
please.
Go back up. That you have like one unit detached. and 1 unit attached, but then you have 2
Yeah.
to 4. What is a 1 unit attached? Like, how is that different from
That,
something that would be 2 to 4 units?
that's a good question. These are not our categories. These are categories by the census. So I would have to look into exactly how that is defined.
Okay.
Brett, would
That
you
just
have a
makes no
guess?
sense in my
or-
brain. So
Yeah, it's a good question. I would just speculate, but I would guess that it is like townhouse development or, um, but then honestly, I lose a little bit of the tracking. Why wouldn't those townhouse developments also be picked up in some of those other categories, like, you know, however many townhomes that are there? But my speculation is that as you go right on this chart, you're probably trending towards more rental properties, but we can go to the census
Right.
data and you can find out about it.
I'm 90% sure.
Okay.
So there's the 10% that could be not, right? But I think it has to do with ownership, like how many of those units are in common ownership. So I think that if they're individually owned units, even if they're attached, like it's not, to some extent, it's like not rental. And so I think that duplexes, if they are like, again,
Owned condo, yeah.
on the structure of the duplex in terms of how they would be counted. But I think any number of townhomes, if they're all individually owned, or row houses, right? Like that would be a more common way that might translate in other parts of the country. I think that they're counted as those 1 unit attached. Sarah.
Okay. Do you have another question? We're good to keep going. Okay, we looked at average duplex and single family home sales over a 10-year period. Again, we can see that, so this says a couple of things that we'll get into, but that duplexes are in general lower cost. These are still expensive, and that is the point that people are bringing up, and they're not wrong, right? I mean, no one's gonna say that an $800,000 duplex is affordable. But what we did find is that it's still cheaper in general than if you were to build a single family home. We did find that there's more turnover. You can see there's quite a bit more blue dots, and that's because they sell more often. And so even though these are homeowner occupied, both the duplex and the single family, that there is more turnover. Our interpretation of that is that they're being used as starter homes, probably. Like, that's one interpretation. I'm open to others, but that this kind of turnover for home ownership could suggest that that is what is being used as a starter home in our community. We look at transportation. We all know that this is changing over time and that it is our responsibility, along with OSI, to try to reduce vehicle mile traveled. So we looked at this, and we can see that no vehicles and one vehicle households are growing in the city. We can also see that emissions in cities are lower than this. Okay, let me start with we look at inflow data of like who is commuting into our city. That's where we get this like close to 80,000 commuters per day. We can also see where they're commuting from. So we looked at some of these top commuter cities that are coming to Ann Arbor, and we looked at their emissions from auto use. And again, this is trying to make the argument that being here, if you had an opportunity to live here, that you would have lower emissions by auto use, and that is aligned with our goals as well. We looked at housing permit data. So this is from HUD, but we also have certificate of occupancy data. So both of those are being discussed here. We can see quite a bit of drop off and change in variety of housing over time that we are hoping to correct with this plan. and we can see where these developments are coming. This has been done by our consultants. And this, I will say, this looks, you can see this relationship very clearly in this chart, like the number of units versus rent, right? The fewer units we have, rent spiked. I do also want to be clear that was 2021. That was a very unique year in the world's history. So you do definitely see this relationship here. I do think it is probably exaggerated from the pandemic. But we did want to look at what is our rent growth in comparison to the number of units that we produce per year. And then also we wanted to show how units age into affordability. So we tried not to use the word naturally occurring affordable housing, but this is what we're getting at here is that, again, the fear is that all of the new development is going to be very expensive. And that may be true, but that over time we can see today it would be much more affordable for someone to live in a unit that was built in the 60s than it would be in 2020 or later. So then that's the data section, and then we have a link here to the housing literature review, which is probably another 13 or so pages, so you can look at that. It is similar, although much more extensive than what I had shown you a few weeks ago. Some of the reports and studies that we've looked into. There is a short recap here, though, like an overview of research findings and the policy suggestions here in one page. If you'd like to look at that, if you'd like to delve deeper, you can. And that I tried, my goal was to be about 20 pages. I almost got there. But I do want it to be fairly accessible, right? Some of these housing studies, if you pay for just that, can be also hundreds of pages. And so this is a pretty succinct look at our housing market.
Yeah, I just, can we go back to page 18? I just, so first of all, thank you. And thank you for putting this together. This was a very delightful appendix to receive and to review. I just wanted to note, because there is a lot of debate about which numbers we use, when we use them, whether or not we're cherry picking numbers to make our claims and so forth. And I think as the author of the appendix inside the staff, you all get to use which data you have available to you and just sort of pick that. And it looks like you have been consistently using the same sort of data sets and the same set of time frames, so that you're sort of showing comparisons, sort of apples to apples, which I appreciate, so that it's not just bopping around data to fit a narrative. On page 18, when you talk about housing permits, you say currently, and I would just ask that you either put a parenthetical for the year, just so that when someone is looking at this in the future, or if you wanted to just do a footnote, because right now we understand that to be June of 2025, but a future reader may not understand that. And that was really it. And I just want to say thank you for putting this together. This is really helpful, and especially for those who have criticized the work that you've done in getting the plan. I think that this sort of supports the assumptions that are built into the plan, that it is based on actual data that someone else can review and draw a similar conclusion. So thank you for presenting this to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Mills?
First, a question, and maybe I missed it, which is where do you imagine this lives? This document, and also the additional lit review? Like, is it part of the comp plan, or is it like something that the comp plan references?
I suppose that could be up to you all to decide. I had imagined that it would be an appendix attached to the document. You sometimes see them on websites though where they're separated, so you could just have the plan and then the appendix could be a separate document posted. But I would like people to know that it is in relation to the draft comprehensive planning effort.
I didn't have a strong preference either way. I'm just thinking like in terms of style.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
different, right? And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think that it addresses kind of the feedback, right? And provides a different look. And maybe that's the argument to put them together, is so that if you like the cartoons, you right, like accessibility, like you come into the comp plan one way, and if what you really are here for is the data, then you can come into it a different way. And so particularly though, if they're living together, I would just want to make sure that whatever numbers are at the front half, and in either case, even if they're indifferent, like that we are using the same data sources, right? And making some of the same claims. So I think that, but this is really great work. The
Can I
other
just
thing,
clarify? Sorry, do you mean to be using the same data sources as the comp plan, or you mean within this document?
yeah, no, well, thank you for asking for the clarification. If there are a couple of places that the draft comp plan talks about similar data sets.
Yeah, right.
I would just want to make sure that we're harmonizing those data sets.
Mm-hmm.
And you brought your citations, like the professor in me says, A+ here. And so like that's just one of the things that you might keep an eye on in the next iteration, since you're very familiar with the citations that you were using.
Yeah.
In reviewing the early chapters of this next draft of the comp plan that were compatible there.
Okay. Thank you. That's a good point.
The
Commissioner
other thing
Mills,
that
can I just, have you had a chance to look at the new draft yet?
Me?
Yes.
No.
Okay. So in the new draft, they use the SIMCOG data. So I just want to highlight your point. So it looks like the comp plan is using SIMCOG, and the appendix is using the literature review that the planning staff came up with. So I actually think they are looking at two different data sets.
And do you think that's good or bad?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would have to think
Right,
of that.
because that's my opinion, that like I
Yep.
don't want to be saying the different things, especially if it's in the same document. But that's my one person's opinion.
Okay. I mean, I'll come back to this because you had another point.
Yeah, it's not on this one, but I would just say I really appreciated the missing middle discussion of what it means, and I just forwarded to you and Brett because it got caught in my drafts box. But I'll verbally describe it to everyone else. A newsletter that I got that's from Momentum to Build Community, which is sent by the kind of similarly like reduce barriers to housing, Housing Next out of Grand Rapids area. One of the things that I think that they included in there was like specific approaches to how do you get missing middle. And I thought they effectively suggested that there are a couple of paths in this kind of effort to encourage more housing and affordability. One is just to subsidize housing. Another is this is their words, remove barriers for big developers. And the third path is the abundance approach, which effectively create support systems that support both large-scale developers and, quote, a small army of small-scale builders. And specifically, they were talking about strategies for how you get 2 and 4 unit buildings. And I feel like this underscores a lot of what we're hearing. And so it included some strategies that I hadn't seen before. And so I hope it'll be included in the packet. But I feel like I'm not sure that that's in the lit review of housing, and maybe something about, because I think that that's the whole, that's one of the things that we should be thinking about in terms of those strategies within
Okay.
within the plan. So thanks, good, but great
Yeah.
work on this.
Can we just quickly come back to the SIMCOG data before moving on? Chair Lee, is that okay?
Yep, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay, so looking at in the revised comp plan that we received today, and I imagine will be posted to the public forthwith, on pages 22 and 23, they now note that they're using the SIMCOG projections for 2025. They put the numbers using that data set somewhere around 120,000 workers commuting into the city, which I don't think undermines your data set, Planner Bennett, who would prefer to be called Michelle in these meetings. And so I think we can solve what Commissioner Mills is asking for with just a very small citation to just say, for the comp plan, this is the data set that we're using. Our housing analysis uses a different data set, but they complement each other. They're not like vastly off, like some of the criticism that we've heard heretofore. It seems like the data set that they're using inside the comp plan is updated, and it supports a bigger density number than was previously put forth. So I feel like you're in harmony with what's in the comp plan. I don't know how to specifically address Commissioner Mills's concern that there's still 2 data sets that we are drawing conclusions from.
Okay, I'll look into this.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from commissioners? Looks like we have Commissioner Adams.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle, for putting this together. I think this is great. One question that I had for you is, this is set up as an empirical kind of a summary of data. As I read it, let me take a step back. I mean, one of the things I like about the economic development report that staff put together 2 years ago, it's a blend of, I think, staff summarizing third party and scholarly work, but also mixing in their own judgments about what they're seeing in the marketplace, and being transparent about the fact that that's what the document is, that it's a mixture of third party work and also we're mixing in our own expertise and creating this document. This read similarly, so I guess if it's correct to say it that way, does it make sense to add that as part of your intro, that this reflects staff judgment about the state of the market and the state of the constraints, in addition to being a research and data summary? Because I think if that's correct, then that's, I mean, I'd like to draw on staff's expertise, right? And if this is truly a reflection of staff's view of what the situation looks like with citations to various authorities, then I think it should say so.
Okay. Yeah, so the note is to explain at the top in the introductory paragraph that this also includes staff's professional judgment.
Right.
Okay.
And that's both, I think, for transparency, but also to aid the reader in understanding where the conclusions are coming from, that this isn't staff making a book report. This is staff saying, this is what we think, and here are some reasons we think that this is true.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'd say is that, to the extent, and this cannot be there's a lot that I think you've got on your plate, but there's been a lot of sort of like nits and quibbles with various like ACS 1 year of whatever date,
Mm.
2022, to the extent there were a couple citations to ACS data that were not dated, if we can clean those up before we finalize, that would be good. But if it's the last thing on your list, then it can fall away. Most of them, I think, had the 1 year, so that one's census 1 year, but it's not dated. Oh no, so they are dated. That one, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just quick reading on my part because it's 2013 and 2023 in the header.
I'll double check.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, Mr. Leonard.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We will definitely make it clear that, we are authoring this appendix as part of this. But I also want to share that conclusion with the Planning Commission. Part of this is you are agreeing with that conclusion by you incorporating this into the appendices of the document. This is a professional literature and research review. It is professional staff opinion, and it is the opinion of you as the Planning Commission aggregating and taking that advice and endorsing that approach. So I think we can do a better job clarifying all of those steps.
Got it. Totally understood. Do we have any other commissioners with comments, questions, thoughts? Yeah, Councilmember Dish.
I've been quiet because I'm listening. And I just wanted to echo how grateful I am to see all of this incredible information and the building of the argument that is done with this. I think that people will, I think that there are many people in Ann Arbor who like empirical based judgment and discussion, and this provides that. So if for them the comp plan was lacking something, which I think Commissioner Mills put it really well, that these are two ways into the policy pathway of the comp plan. So it's not like one was incomplete and the other's better. It's there are two ways in. I think this gives some people another way in, and I think it's terrific. And thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dish. Do we have other comments, questions? Okay, I have a question just from a timeline and procedural standpoint. So I think the question that's in front of us, and not that we have any kind of decisions that we have to make here, but it is effectively to gain feedback about is this appropriate to append to the comprehensive plan. My question is, what does the timeline look like just from an updated timeline standpoint? This is obviously a lot of information that is, again, very relevant. Thank you again for putting all of this together. Just for all the listeners we have, what does the updated time frame look like from here till, again, how much time do people have to read, digest, give feedback, feedback sessions? Can you just kind of lead us through that?
Sure.
Thank you.
I did update this recently on the engagement hub, and that is just what our planning commission schedule is for the end of this month and early July. So the second draft of the comprehensive plan will be posted this week and shared through our communication channels at the city. We use GovDelivery. We have many email subscribers. We have social media. We have the engagement tool or engagement portal. So it'll be posted there. We will not discuss it again as a planning commission until June 24th. So residents can come to the planning commission then to provide their public comment, and as well on July 1st. So we've given ourselves 2 sessions, which I guess remains to be seen if it's enough. But ideally, we would discuss the second draft in those 2 sessions so that we could send it back for the third round, and have that back by the middle of July, so that you all as a commission can make your recommendation or forward to council that you would like this to go to the 63-day review period. And then in August, it would go to council and they would approve the opening of the 63-day review period. And then it would be open for 2 months And then that's when the public hearings would start in October and November at the culmination of the 63-day review period. So what's next is to review the second draft, and that's the 2 sessions on June 24th and July 1st.
Got it. So we'll have 2 sessions, June 24th and July 1st, to review the second draft. For those listening, please come join us on those dates to review the second draft. Question on the second draft, is this will this be posted concurrently? Where is this, other than, obviously I think it's posted in our agenda right now, but I just want to make sure that we give as much time as possible, / what's the kind of next step with respect to this appendix?
Oh, the appendix?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I was looking for your feedback tonight. I will look into these few things that you've asked for, and then
I would say we
it's
would,
not going to be a part of the new draft, right? Because that has been sent to you. But the goal is that by the third and final round, that it will be in that document as well, with these changes that you have requested this evening.
Okay.
I would say in the meantime, we could just post this draft also to the engagement hub, just so this version of it that was shared with your packet is also available there. That's just another access point for people to grab the document.
Yes, I think that's important. I just want to make sure
Okay.
that there's much time to grapple with the data. So, Commissioner Weich.
I was afraid you were gonna move on, so that's why I raised my hand. So you like to do a summary of things. So if you're still in the midst of that, I can wait till you're done.
No.
Okay.
This is the time.
All right. So can we go back to your housing draft, Michelle, who prefers to be referred to as Michelle, for those who are listening, wondering whether or not I'm using the correct honorifics. In your subheading property taxes, could we, and this is just something that I would appreciate, instead of us exclusively talking about property taxes, which seems to infer ownership, can we also include that our renters pay property taxes, and
Yeah, absolutely.
and then just source that, because most developers, the first like $700 of the rent in what they're putting together is their property tax, because it's uncapped, and so they're being taxed at the highest assessed value. And so I think this, when we only talk about it as property taxes, I think it reinforces this notion that only
Right.
those who own property pay taxes, which I think is false. And especially in a city where we have a majority of our population who are renters, I think it's just a falsehood to assume that the tax burden is only being paid by those who own property individually or exclusively.
Agreed. Thanks for that catch.
Mr. Mills.
If you're gonna make a change to that, you might also just, it's 1 or 2 sentences about the fact that they are not getting the homestead exemption. They would be paying non-homestead taxes, which doesn't necessarily accrue locally, but altogether it means that they're paying more to the state level education fund. So, and if you need that, we have some very nerdy property tax explainers for
Oh, great.
renewal that just came out. So like you can actually just pull it directly from there, that I can put it in an email for you.
Okay. I'd appreciate that.
All right. Do we have any other commissioners' comments, thoughts? See anybody? If not, Michelle, do you think you have everything you need?
Yes.
Okay, got it. All right. For those of us listening, again, the June 24th and July 1st for our next review sessions. So thank you so much for your help and presentation and all your work in putting this together. So, all right, we're going to move on to the section 4 of our working session, which is going to be public comments. So persons may speak for 3 minutes on any item at this point. Please, to listen or speak, or to speak at public comment, please Either raise your hand or call 206-337-9723 or 213-338-8477 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. All right. Looks like we have so far one hand raised. Mr. Leonard, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes. Gaurav Kulkarni,
Hi.
please address the planning commission for up to 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. My name is Gaurav, 139 Ashley Muse Drive. First of all, wanted to thank you for putting this together. The appendix was just a really great read. I wanted to talk about this sort of theory that higher turnover for duplexes could suggest starter homes. And so I wanted to share my housing story, and this is just one person. But in 2021, I was a single guy in my 30s, ready to buy my first home. And at that time, a 2,500 square foot detached single family home just like doesn't make sense for me. And so what is the housing that doesn't make sense? 1,000 square foot or less, close to downtown where I could walk to places. That would be the ideal. Near downtown means it's going to be expensive, but like a smaller unit brings that price down. I got really lucky. I was able to move into a 1-bedroom condo that was built 20 years ago. And at the time, bought it knowing it wasn't my forever home, but that it would serve me for the next 5 to 10 years. Since 2021, my partner has moved in with me, and in the coming years, we plan on starting a family in this home. There is space for a baby here, especially seeing friends and relatives raising babies in similar housing. And eventually we will outgrow this space and we will need a bigger space, but we are in a better position to buy our forever home because I can sell my current home. And so I just wanted to say that I felt myself really reflected in that section of the appendix, and I wanted to thank you for that. It is just one anecdote of one person, but it wouldn't surprise me if there were other people that are like me. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Do we have any other callers that would like to speak at this time?
No other hands raised at this time. Oh, I spoke too fast. Karen Hart, you can unmute and address the planning commission for up to 3 minutes.
Thanks. I just wanted to say I thought that appendix draft was excellent and a great addition, and kudos to the staff for pulling that together. I think that will provide a lot of context for people and really strengthen people's understanding of why the policies are being proposed. So keep it up. Great job.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hart. All right. Do we have other callers on the line that would like to speak at this time? I'm gonna give it a few more seconds. By now, y'all know how I roll. Okay. With that, we are going to close public comment. All right, we're going to move on to communication. This is the various communications to the Planning Commission. Was there specifically something that we wanted to review here, Mr. Leonard, or was this simply put for us to be able to?
No. So we, this was just included. This same communication will also be included with your regular packet. Sorry about that. So when there's something apropos to the working session conversation, we try to include it, but we also include it with the published packet for your regular meetings. So apart from that, nope.
Got it. Thank you.
With Chair Lee.
Yes.
Can I avail myself in this quick moment here?
Sure. Yep. Okay.
So in our public comments, we had a writer ask about the data that we got for the infrastructure. So the original report from the presentation that we received last week was using the SIMCOG data, which had a projection of 200 or so units of development each year. And then they referenced that the actual was higher. I think it was north of 600. And so I just wanted to acknowledge, like, we saw that we're not in charge of the infrastructure plans, citations, and I don't think those numbers come into the comp plan. They do show up in Michelle's report, but they show up as the current permitting under the permits. So it's showing up as 600. So I think the writer was asking like, which number are you using? Are you using the SIMCOG projection or are you using a different one? And it looks like we're using the actuals. So I just wanted to state that on the record. I don't know that it requires us to update any documents, but that's the one that we are currently using.
Got it. Michelle.
I wanted to add to that that there was a request from Planning Commission to update some of the slides to include the current, and that staff is working on that, and that will be provided hopefully this week.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that feedback. With that, I suppose I'll open the floor before we adjourn to anybody else with any kind of comments, just because we opened up on communications. Yes, Mr. Leonard.
If I could just briefly add my kudos, Michelle and colleagues did a lot of great work on the appendix, and I will say that sometimes I find that in the context of speaking from a bureaucrat, and I use that term with love. I care deeply about doing that job well. Sometimes it's hard to devote the space to this kind of, frankly, long form research and narrative. And I just think she did an outstanding job. So I just want to add my kudos to Michelle as well.
I will second that. And I'm sure a lot of folks feel the same. Thank you for that, Mr. Leonard. I think that's a perfect place for us to move to the final item of our evening, which is adjournment. So without any further ado, have a good night, everybody. Thank you.